If you'll indulge me, I would like to apologize now for the length of this episode. I did not expect it to run as long as it did, but it's Q&A time. And you never quite know what might happen, all right? I got some questions that required of me some in-depth and long-form answers, okay? But that does not mean it is not fun and not interesting. We got into some road stories, we got into some literature, to some silly stuff, and then towards the end, some fairly heavy-duty and I think practical spirituality, and of course, a song recommendation that I think is pretty freaking cool. So sit down, cross-legged on the carpet, grab yourself a juice box, and we'll get to it on the other side. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. This one's gonna get weird, okay? I'm telling you straight up off the hop, this episode's gonna get weird because it turned into, rather unexpectedly, it's turning into a Q&A episode, which I like to do once in a while. And one of the reasons I like to do the Q&A episodes is because they're gonna get weird. And I know they're gonna get weird, and I think they are a nice break from the pattern. Up to a point, you will have noticed that the last several episodes I've been just focusing on a lot of new music and talking about new music and whatever, and maybe that's your bag, and I hope it is. If you're still here, I suppose, in the end, it is your bag, and that's great, but once in a while, it's nice to break up the pattern, give you something else to consider, something else to listen to. So this is going to get weird because they always do. The Q&A ones always get weird because we get questions coming in from people with different perspectives, different stuff going on, want to know about different things. And so while this is primarily a music-focused podcast, we may get into sports or books or spirituality or who knows what becomes a bit of a grab bag. Now, you may be noticing something in my voice right now. If this is your first visit to the podcast, first of all, welcome. Welcome, welcome, one and all. My voice is a little not quite there, and that worries me because at a certain point yesterday afternoon, I felt that familiar pang in the back of my throat, right at the base of my nose, and we all know by now what that familiar pang is. It is the pang of an impending sickness. This frustrates me to no end because if you've been hanging around, you know that a couple months ago, when I was in the throes of 2 solid months of almost debilitating back spasms, I kept re-injuring my back, coughing, because I picked up what I thought at the time was a cold, but I'm beginning to suspect now was perhaps that other C word. And you think, well, I just had 2 months ago a horrendous cold, maybe something else for like 3 solid weeks. It was a brutal time, man. It was a rough, long, cold winter, as Tom Kiefer might have sang. And you think, surely 2 months later, I can't be getting it again, can I? Feels as though I am, and it's already begun to leak into my vocal cords. So if you are accustomed to my normally bassy, dulcet tones, gives you a warm feeling, warms your cockles to hear that voice in your ear holes. You may be experiencing something somewhat different this time, and I do not know, as we embark on this journey, I do not know how long the voice will last. I am drinking blueberry tea. I am drinking hot blueberry tea and trying my best. Now, there have been times when I've played gigs when my voice hasn't been there. I've lost my voice more than once heading into a show. Doesn't kill the show because I'm just a backup singer. But one of the things you can do is drink a lot of tea, hot tea, ginger tea, lemon tea, And then one of the other things that I've discovered to bring the voice back a little bit, to shake some of the dust off those vocal cords, the lemon tea and the ginger tea really help. But doing just low hums. You know what I mean? Just humming without overextending the vocal cords. To a certain extent will bring some of that back. You may not get your high range back, but hopefully you'll get enough to be able to get yourself through the show, you know? In this case, I've been doing some humming. I'm trying to keep the voice going, and I realize as I'm talking right now that I'm probably wasting a lot of the precious vocal cord that I have left. It's turned into question day, and I hope that's cool by you. And the first set of questions comes to us from no less than Carly Thomas herself, singer-songwriter extraordinaire with whom I have performed many, many times over the past, kind of on and off over the past, what's it getting to be almost 10 years, believe it or not. I think it was at the very latest 2014 when Carly and I first played together. That's all a fun story. She and I have had some compelling adventures. And we continue to play together when she's around, but she is based mostly in Nashville these days, and I think at this moment is in California, on the road, doing that tour thing without me. Hope she's having a good time. Carly wrote to me. She asked some interesting ones. The first was, what are some of your weirdest audience moments? If you are new to the program, I am what I proudly describe as a working drummer, not a professional drummer, although some might make that argument. I do not consider myself a professional drummer, although I get paid to play the drums. For me, the term professional implies a level of proficiency that I do not feel I possess. So I describe myself proudly as a working drummer because that's what I am. I play the drums, I play in a lot of bands, I play around, I've done some touring, etc. It does not make me special, just makes me a working drummer. If you're new to the show, you might not know that, so a lot of the questions I get have to do with my gigging experience, right? My touring experience, my recording experience, such as they are. So I've done a lot of work with Carly, and she says, what are some of your weirdest audience moments? And that's an interesting question, because people will often ask you, what was the best show you played, or the worst show, or the strangest show, or whatever, but nobody asks about the audience. So this is one that's been fun for me to consider. And I do not have a lot of what you might describe as extraordinary audience or weird audience moments, but the ones I've had, curiously enough, tend to have come during Carly shows. So this will be a fun reminiscence for you, Carly, if you are listening. And if you are, probably the strangest, certainly one of them, strangest audience moment I've had occurred in the great mountain town of Banff, Alberta. Is this twigging any memories for you, Carly? You might remember the band house. That was not a weird audience moment. That was a weird cousin moment. I think it was Banff, might have been Jasper. I don't remember exactly. Back in, I want to say 15, I think it was 15, Carly and I hopped on the Via Rail train and went all the way across Canada. I've talked about this before. We have talked about it together on this show. Rode from Toronto to Vancouver aboard the Via train as the performing artist on board. 3 shows a day for free passage and free meals. Pretty good work if you can get it, man. During that process, this turned into a 6-week odyssey. We jumped off the train in Edmonton. We did a couple weeks of shows around Alberta, 10 or 12 shows, something like that. And we were performing as a duo, electric guitar, drums, 2 voices. And there came a certain point in our trajectory when Carly and I were something akin to a well-oiled machine as a duo. Now, she traditionally plays acoustic guitar, right? And has an electric guitar player, a lead guitar player in her band, but it was just the 2 of us. And so she took it upon herself to begin to fill in some of that space with the guitar. Switched to electric and started messing around with pedals and effects and got to be really, really good at creating these get your shot ready soundscapes. Hit that shot. That's another drinking game for us here. She got to be really good at creating depth musically that is very difficult to do, right? Just drums and guitar. It's tough to create a full and effective sound that way. She's getting really good at it on electric guitar with some effects, and then we were singing together, and we had done a lot of this, all right? And we created a pretty well-oiled machine, just the two of us, for a while. We had done that in preparation for this tour, which we knew was mostly going to be just the two of us. That's just an aside. So we were out in Alberta, and we were in the mountains. And if you have not been to the mountains, if you have not been to the Rocky Mountains, get thee there presently. I will wait. Driving through the Rockies is just like getting punched in the face increasingly harder by visions of beauty every 10 seconds. You see a mountain and you think, well, it can't get better than that, can it? And then you go around a corner and there's another one that's more magnificent. And then another, and then another. It's just wild. If you've not been out there, fly yourself to Calgary, Alberta. Rent yourself a car if you can still find one to rent. And if you've got the $8 million to do so, drive through the mountains. Go to Banff, go to Jasper. Just be there and just witness, especially if you're from Ontario, where we don't have a lot of topography. We got lakes. We don't have mountains. Not like that, man. Not like that. Go out there and just bask in the magnificence, the stunning magnificence of the Rocky Mountains. It's freaking incredible. We did that. We played around Alberta, dipped into Saskatchewan for one gig that was quite memorable, and then drove to the mountains and we played out there, and absolutely freaking stunning. If you have not done that, do it presently. So I think we were in Banff at this club. It's just a bar, we booked a lot of bar gigs. It was cool. Two of us are playing, and it's one of those nights where there's not a lot of people. All right, now Carly and I are good, but sometimes, especially out there, we didn't necessarily have name recognition. It's hard to pull a crowd. Sometimes on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you just count on the locals to be there. And some of them were, not a lot of them. So we were performing, and the dance floor in front of the stage was, for the most part, empty. There were people listening. There were smatterings of applause at the end of each song. I'm not complaining about the gig, just setting the scene for you, all right? This is a dark bar in Alberta and a nice stage. We're on it. I got my 3-piece set up. Carly's playing electric guitar. And we're doing the show, but there's nobody on the dance floor until there is. And all of a sudden, without any expectation, without any announcement, without any forewarning, the dance floor was suddenly broiling with what we called at the time gypsies. I've since learned that gypsies is considered kind of a pejorative term for travelers. I am told that the politically correct term for those traveling people is Roma. I believe they are called, the plural is Roma, Rome or Roma. This is apparently the word for people in, I'm not sure what language, but the notion is the origins of these folks is in India. They came to Europe via Romania and then dispersed throughout Europe and were called for a long, long time gypsies. And I believe that that was derived from Egypt. So there had been Egyptians that were traveling that way. And so people assumed that such traveling groups were Egyptians and then called them gypsies. Please don't cancel me for this. I'm trying to sort out what the history is and what's politically correct and what is not. We are very inclusive here. It's much like when Christopher Colombo showed up on the shores of North America thinking that the Native Americans were Indians because he was looking for a passage to India, kids. thought he found one. And so he met the Aboriginal population, and said, "You guys are Indians." They said, "We're not Indians." He said, "You're Indians." I'm borrowing from Louis C.K. on this. And I think it's much the same, as that these original traveling folks the caravan kind of folks were Egyptians, and they'd pulled the word gypsies from Egypt and then just stuck that name on every band of traveling people. And now that's considered a pejorative term. I don't know if in 2014 or 15 or whenever this was, that was a pejorative term. If it is now, I apologize. I'm just trying to give a picture. A bunch of, we will say, bohemians. Is that a bad word? I don't know what's good anymore. I will turn 50 in September, so you're going to have to cut me some generational slack. I've reached an age where I will ask for some generational slack. I'm trying my best to understand the politically correct terminology. In BC, you see a lot of backpackers. All right, BC, Alberta, you see a lot of people who travel, and that's just very, very common out there. And so a group of these people were suddenly whirling around the dance floor, and I don't know how many, but it seemed as though it was full, and they sprung up out of absolutely freaking nowhere. Like it was Deadsville on that dance floor, and then all of a sudden, there were felt like dozens of them, just whirling, just dancing for all they're worth, having a great freaking time, and then they were just gone. Then, all of a sudden, as quickly as they had filled the dance floor and filled that venue, they were gone. Like ghosts. Like wisps. Very, very freaking weird. And I can remember just looking around going, did that happen? Did I hallucinate that? What just happened here? A room that was empty was suddenly full with bohemian types going off, and then whoosh, they were gone again. How mysterious. And it was the same night that another really bizarre audience thing happened. And it was during one of the moments when the dance floor was kind of empty. There was nobody around except one solitary woman with a ponytail who stood 2 feet in front of Carly. The dance floor is empty. All right, even if there are people at the show, do you know how hard you got to work to get them to come up to the front of the stage? You're in the band, and maybe you've got 40 people in the room, but it's a big enough room that they can stand 25 feet back from the stage. That's where they stand. Do the band a favor and go up front, for crying out loud. Make it feel like a freaking show. Do you know how hard we have to work to pull you in from 20 feet back up to the front of the stage where the show is? Don't be shy. Come up. Be part of the freaking show, will you? Helps the bands a lot. This woman, all by herself, right up front, standing, transfixed, mesmerized by Carly, 2 feet away, just staring at her, expressionless, as though she was seeing some sort of apparition. Now, Carly is, of course, vexing and transfixing, but I suspect there may have been substances involved in this particular incident. I don't want to put drugs in anybody's system, but I got that kind of impression. And you kind of see this as you go along, So I think that was the same night. 2 of the weirdest audience things ever happened on the same night, and they happened to be at Carly Thomas gigs. And the question was posed by Carly, and I'm sure she's remembering these things right now, hopefully fondly. But there was another Carly one that really should warm your cockles. And if it doesn't, you might want to check yourself, man. Might want to get to the mountains. We were playing in L-Town. There used to be a venue called the Shire. And the Shire was the upstairs of a house. The downstairs had been converted to a restaurant. The upstairs was a venue. And it held, I don't know what it held, 50 people, 60 people, if it was packed out. Small room, really intimate. And it was, for a minute, the absolute heart of the local indie music scene. That was the place to be. Friday night, Saturday night, somebody was always playing the Shire, and the whole scene would gather there. And this, again, goes back 7 or 8 years. The Shire is now long gone, torn down, replaced by condominiums. condominiums, I heard them described as one time. Long gone, but the memories remain. So we were playing there one night, and it was kind of a stripped down gig. I think we had a bass player with us. Might have been just the two of us. I can't remember. But it was billed as kind of a stripped down night. So I was playing a mini kit. Carly was playing acoustic. She was telling a lot of stories. And we were playing the show, playing the songs. And at a certain point, I may be not remembering this correctly, but it's how it seems to me. My impression is Carly started telling a story, and some of the people sat down on the floor as though it was story time at kindergarten. And a bunch of them just sat down cross-legged, looking up at Carly telling her story, which was really freaking adorable, I must say. And so she told the story, and we played whatever song it was. And so it remained, I think, for the rest of the gig. People sitting on the floor cross-legged, as though it were story time, listening to Carly talk and then listening to us play the freaking songs. And I've never seen that anywhere before. Now, I have seen people on the floor at shows. Not exactly the same, all right? So that was just a really weird one, but a really nice one. Warms your cockles, and you're looking down at all these faces looking up at you. Looking up at Carly, not at me, let's be honest. But it was really fun. You know, music takes you to just some really interesting places and shows you a lot of really interesting things. I've racked my brain. Can't really remember a lot of weird stuff happening. Had a weird one in Texas. Was down in Texas with Sarah Smith and Ken the Zen. And that was a winter thing in 2020, just before the C word hit, man. Just before life changed for all of us. And what the game was you go down there and you play at the RV resorts. Now, I am reluctant to say you play at the trailer parks, because it ain't that. I've been through this before. You say trailer park, you picture Cletus and Brandine. Not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about RV resorts, where retirees, mostly from the northern states and from Canada, the winter Texans, are down there in their, $100,000 RVs, wintering in the sunshine. And so you go to play to those audiences, and the game is, you can play some original music if you're sly about it, but you play some oldies and you play some stuff of the variety that an older generation might like. But sometimes you don't know just how old that generation is. So we're playing at whatever place it was, and they were always very dignified shows. They start at 7. At 8 o'clock, I got an ice cream bar in my hand. Then we play another set, and we go home, and we're home by 10. Now, lots of times, you're not even on by 10. You're playing clubs. Sometimes you're not going on till freaking midnight, and that's got to stop, man. These shows are very dignified. On at 7, home by 10. Fabulous, man. But we play some oldies. So we worked up some 70s stuff, some 60s stuff, and we had played some Beatles. We had been playing the Beatles. And at set break, this woman comes up to me and Ken, and she's like, yeah, we're enjoying it and everything, but, the music you're playing is too modern. She said, you're playing our kids' music. I'm like, she referenced specifically the Beatles. You're playing our kids' music. Lady, your kids' music is freaking going on 60 years ago, all right? Dude, we're not playing music that's too freaking modern, all right? So you wind up in some weird criticisms too, man. So there's a few slightly weird audience stories. You musicians out there, I'm struggling over my words. My throat is really, really hurting. And so my diction and my tongue movement is just a little bit off today. I apologize for that. Musicians out there, you got weird audience stories, and I'm sure you do, because I know wild stuff happens, man. Stuff that would not be looked upon favorably in the Bible happens at gigs, all right? I've seen a lot of weird stage stuff. I have seen a buck-naked drummer with a police hat on. I've seen that. Weird stuff happens in the audience, so if you got some good ones, send them my way. Maybe I'll share them on the show. Carly asked another kind of strange one that I've had to contemplate. She said to me, if you could be a bird, what kind of a bird would you be? I'm like a bird. I want to fly away. I think my answer to that question is I would be a bald eagle. I like big and powerful. You know what I mean? If I can't be that in life, I would like to be that as a bird. One of the reasons I picked that is it gives me a chance to read to you kids. So sit down on the floor, cross your legs like it's kindergarten story time. Gives me a chance to read to you from one of my favorite novels, which is Life After God by the great and powerful Douglas Copeland. It's from the early stages, the early pages of Life After God, which was a transformative book for me as a writer and as a reader. You know, this is a really potent and profound book. And I'm going to read from the opening pages. All right, I'm starting on page 4. And this is the narrator of the story who is driving with his young daughter up to the grandparents' place to drop her off. And he's going through a separation, divorce, and he's not super happy, man. And he's contemplating a lot of the stuff. And this question of what kind of bird would you be, eagle, gives me a chance to read, all right. Here we are driving through British Columbia. It was a jerky drive, punctuated by my having to stop at convenience stores and diners all along the way to try and reach my lawyer from payphones. On the good side, however, you, referencing his daughter, were noticing all of the animals in the world for the first time in your life. All of the animal life outside the car's windows. It started near the trip's beginning, in the farmlands of the Fraser Valley with its cows and sheep and horses. It became obsessive a half hour later, just past Chilliwack, near the end of the valley, when I pointed out a bald eagle sitting like a big stack of money beside the road atop a snaggy pine tree. You were so excited that you didn't even notice that the Flintstone Bedrock City Amusement Park was closed. You asked questions about the animals, some real toughies. And these questions came as a welcome diversion from payphones and tiredness. Just after you saw the eagle, you asked me, seemingly out of the blue, where do people come from? I wasn't sure if you meant the birds and bees or if you meant the ark or what have you. Either direction was a tad too much for me to handle just then, but you did get me to thinking. I mean, 5,000 years ago, people emerge out of nowhere, sproing, with brains and everything, and begin wrecking the planet. You'd think we'd give the issue more thought than we do. You repeated your question again, and so I gave you a makeshift answer of the sort that parents aren't supposed to give. I told you people came, quote, from back east. This seemed to satisfy you. And then, at that point, we both became distracted. You, by a blotch of raccoon-based roadkill that riveted your attention just off the highway's shoulder, and me by another phone booth. Lawyers, Jesus. Someday you cross this thin line, and you really realize that we need to protect ourselves from ourselves. The phone call was long and filled with not very good news, interrupted by 18-wheelers roaring past me and by me yelling at you not to poke the poor ex-raccoon with a stick. I told Wayne, my lawyer, about the eagle, and he loved it, because he always calls his ego his eagle. My eagle is soaring today. That kind of thing. I don't think Douglas Copeland had my podcast voice in mind when he was writing that. Sorry, I don't know. I don't want to come off as a performance. It's just kind of what happens when the microphone gets turned on. I would be an eagle, Carly. Wild and free and big and living in an enormous nest. There are eagles in L-Town, right above Labatt Park. They're not bald eagles, I don't think. But they built a huge nest, like on the light standard, where the night lights flash down. Very, very interesting. I think I would be an eagle. Carly also asked me what a perfect day is for me, and what I'm going to say about that is that I've already answered that question. Episode 123, I believe our old friend Corey of Collective Evolution asked me, what's a perfect day for you now and in 5 years? The gist of that answer is any day when I get up and I set myself to the work that is my dharma. Anytime I get up and set myself to the work that is my work to do. And I don't know if I've found that work. I don't think I have. And it's an eternal struggle for me. And it frustrates me that I've yet to really plug in to what my work actually is. I do this and I play music. I was writing for a while. Now, I dabble in all of these things, but I've yet to really plug in. A perfect day for me does not have to be exotic. It does not have to involve exotic things. It has to involve me getting up and setting myself to the work, which is my purpose. And maybe you, Carly, as a songwriter and as a performer, can understand that. Because maybe a perfect day for you is getting up and just writing songs or performing or whatever. And that is your dharma. That is your purpose. And for me, a day that expresses that is a perfect day. You can hear more about that on episode 123, all right? I'm going to thank Carly for those questions. I did not intend to go so long with them, but it gives me a lot to think about. You know, this is partly therapy for me to approach some of these questions. Think about them. Think about what I really feel about them. And you may ask yourself the same dang questions. And what do they say about you and what do they do for you? I don't know. But I will tell you this. Nobody asked for it, but I'm going to give it anyway. And that is, it's time for the Patreon plug. Very quickly, yes, say it with me, kids. Very quickly, yes, there is a Patreon page for this podcast. It is patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast, where for the low monthly membership price of $5, you can support the program. You may think of it as tipping me $1.25 for every episode of this program that I do. If you get entertainment, if you have your cockles warmed, if you are entertained, inspired, educated, if you are introduced to new music, if you just like hearing a friendly voice in your ear holes once a month, and you think to yourself, you know what? One of these episodes is worth $1.25 to me. I think I can tip that cat $1.25 for the work he's doing. Then you may do so. You can do so via Patreon, and it spares all of you listening to the ad reads, again, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and man, you're flowing along with the content, and then all of a sudden, there will literally be 3 or 4 or 5 solid minutes of ads and commercials, and this is the reason we got away from AM radio to start with, man. It is the reason why when you finally accept a Spotify membership, the first thing to go is the freaking ads. It's blackmail, man. They are holding you over the freaking wheel of advertising. I don't want to make you have to listen to that. And so my alternative is Patreon, all right? It is not expensive. $5 a month is the one tier that I've got. And it says to me, you appreciate the work I'm doing. You appreciate the content I am trying to deliver for you. You support the mission, kids. Positive talk, mostly positive talk. Warm your cockles, give you a friendly voice in your ears just once a week. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. I can do the rest of the rigmarole for you. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. If you can't do that, that is also totally fine. Advertising is what it is. Word of mouth is still the best game, man. So if you want to help me and you don't want to do the Patreon thing, that's totally fine. Share the episodes. Tell a friend. Tell a buddy. If you have friends who like podcasts, if you have friends who are into music, into history, into culture, whatever, want to hear some positive stuff for a freaking change, because the internet, the international discourse, the digital discourse is so vitriolic and negative. And if you just want to get away from that and hear positive things, you got friends who could use that in your lives. Tip them off, please. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, John Huff Podcast. Share the episodes. Follow me on those platforms. I try my best to provide other and related fulfilling content on those platforms. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much. People who have become patrons, thank you. People who have followed, thank you. People who have shared, thank you. People who send in questions, thank you. That tells me you are engaged. It tells me that this is worth investing for you. And that warms my cockles, kids. Patreon.com/JohnHuffPodcast. If merch is your thing, t-shirts, mugs, we got them. John-Huff.com/shop. Thank you as well to the people who have come along and picked up the merch. I do appreciate it. That ends my personal commercial. 2 more questions that are heavy, and I will try to deal with them as efficiently as I can. Our old friend Jay Good old Jay, longtime supporter of the program, owner of merch. Jay and his family have been huge supporters of the show, and I am always keen to answer questions he may deliver to me. He sent us a tight one, though, man. He sent us a question that says, is there any new original music left to be made? Is there any new original music left to be made? And the easy answer, the surface answer to that question, Jay, is yeah. Of course there is. I hear new original music all the freaking time. It's mostly what I talk about on this show. But I think we all know that's not really the question Jay is asking. I think what he's asking is there any room for new original material that does not sound like something we have heard before? And the answer to that is also yes. I mean, we featured recently on this show High Castle Teleorchestra. Now, that may not get your toes tapping, that may or may not be your bag, but it cannot be denied that High Castle Teleorchestra is strikingly original music. The thing is, you are not going to find this in the mainstream. You gotta go and seek it out, all right? The mainstream does not do original music. By that, I mean the mainstream does not do music that takes a risk. The mainstream is not about music and not about music listeners. The mainstream is about profit and shareholders. That is how genres happen. That is how movements happen. You know, in the early 80s, doesn't there come a band out of the Sunset Strip, which has got the sound and has got the look for this fledgling new outlet called music television. And that band gets picked up and becomes a hit on music television, and all of a sudden the labels are lining up to sign every other band that looks and sounds like that. Why? Because it's as close as they can get to a sure thing. This is what the people like. This is hot right now. We will flood the airwaves with lookalikes, with soundalikes, right? Because that is the surest way of guaranteeing profit growth for the bottom line, for the shareholders. It is a big problem, and it stifles, to a certain extent, creativity, and it makes corporations a-holes because they always have to grow. They always have to be improving the bottom line because the shareholders get mad if they don't. How much better would it be if a company could pull down a comfortable $1 billion a year and everybody gets paid and everything is healthy and we all go home happy and we don't have to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and lay people off and jerk people around and screw people over, get into shady stuff because we've got to push that billion to 1.1 or the shareholders get angry. And this happens across the freaking board, man. And it screws employees and it screws people. You know, people are not a factor in the equation. You know, they say all the time, why are you killing yourself for a company that will replace you in a week if you die? It is not about people, and music is not about listeners in the mainstream, all right? It's kind of like that scene in Enemy at the Gates. Remember Enemy at the Gates, that movie about the Battle of Stalingrad? And there's a scene where the Russian soldiers, poorly equipped, are pouring across the river, running into Stalingrad to try and confront head-on the Nazis invading and defend the city. And there's an officer with a megaphone. They got a rifle for every 2 soldiers, right? So the officer is shouting into the megaphone, you know, run in pairs, and when the person with the rifle gets killed, the next person picks up the rifle. It's kind of like that. You know, one thing gets hot, and then we just run everybody across the river, and you're hoping that there's enough rifles that everybody makes a freaking profit, right? Then you get to the end of that scene, you know, people get tired of what became the glam scene, and then a new crop of bands comes up that doesn't want to be like their older brothers' bands, doesn't want to do that thing, wants to do something quote-unquote new. And they take off all of the makeup and the spandex and the artifice, and they start playing something that becomes grunge. And all the labels immediately, whoosh, turn that freaking direction. And all those glam bands are gone. And now there's 8 million copycat grunge bands. This is how the mainstream works. It always has, it always will. Although I think it was different maybe back in the old days. Back in the days of the kind of glory days of labels, when a band would get signed based on its talent, maybe, and then given some sort of leeway, 3-4 records to develop, to get better, right? And the label would work with the band to help them get better shows, better songs, whatever. That doesn't happen anymore. It's like you're one hit and out, man, and then you're shot and the next band comes along to pick up that rifle. You know what I mean? And it's the mainstream. And it kills creativity because creativity is risky. Where you find this is in the underground. You don't even find it on indie radio. I can remember distinctly traveling through a large metropolitan center, which had a dedicated indie radio station. Not indie as in playing independent music, but indie as in playing indie music. Indie rock, the stuff that does not appear on your top 40s radio station. And I was dismayed when I turned on the indie rock station to hear them playing freaking Red Hot Chili Peppers. Come on, man. Really? You're going to call yourself the indie station and you're playing Red Hot Chili Peppers? Not that they're not a good band. This is not a value judgment, but it's like, really? Does it get more mainstream than that? Come on, man. So you're not even going to hear it on indie radio, but you may find it in your local scene. All right. Now, around this scene in the last year or two has begun to spring up a movement based around improvised music. Now, some of that stuff gets pretty freaking weird, man. And there may be in your town, Jay, a scene beginning to happen around different types of music, and it might be improv. That's a big thing here. There are several new acts coming up that are doing this style of music. A lot of the members are shared between them. You know, all it takes is 2 or 3 champions to begin to put this together. And that's what's happening in this local scene. So you may go to a craft brewery on a Tuesday night, and you may hear a 12-minute improvised jam between drummer and theremin. You ain't going to hear that on your top 40s radio station, all right? Unless Taylor Swift is involved, or Harry Styles, or one of the others, right? And if that happens, and you want to go see it live, it's going to cost you $25,000 for a freaking ticket. So I suggest going into your local scene if you can. You know, check out craft breweries, because a lot of the live music that's happening now is happening there. And on a Tuesday, Wednesday night, that might be experiment night. And all of a sudden, you may find right in your own backyard this kind of new, innovative sound that we have not really heard before. And you know, the other thing you can hold on to is AI music. AI music is the next freaking thing, man. And heaven knows what the computers are going to make that the labels will tell us is really great. And they'll jump all over it. Why? Because it's free. They don't have to pay musicians. That's the game the world over. How can we not pay musicians? I've seen that with my own freaking eyes. Campus radio might help. All right. Now, the digital age makes it possible that we can access campus radio where it still exists from all over the world. And I listen to our local campus station, campus radio, where it still exists. I think a lot of campus stations are beginning to disappear too because, hey, budget, money, whatever. You know, it's frustrating, but this is happening. Check out campus radio because they can play anything on campus radio, and they frequently do. You'll rarely hear Red Hot Chili Peppers on campus radio, okay? But you will hear weird stuff from the underground that may tip you off to a new sound or a new vibe or a new thing happening that has not really been heard before. And then you get bands like The Who That's the HU, which are doing really interesting things with traditional instruments, playing banging stuff, by the way. It's out there, and I understand the frustration. I understand this feeling like everything old is new again. There's nothing new under the sun. We see this in movies. There's a lot of great TV happening. Okay, maybe there's some innovation going on there. Movies have become incredibly stale. The music scene, maybe so, which is why we keep seeing these kind of retro movements beginning to happen, But the great innovations don't tend to happen in the mainstream, and that's the answer. I think it is out there. I think people are making really interesting stuff. It's just really hard to find it. But I think it exists, and I think it's there. And I think if you look hard enough, you will find it, and maybe you can be ahead of the curve on the next big thing. The last question comes to us from our old friend Ken the Zen. The mighty Ken the freaking Zen. And he sent me a question that probably deserves its own whole podcast. But I'm going to try and give an answer in 10 minutes or less. I was going to work up some strength because, again, I'm feeling the impending onset of an illness, running out of freaking energy. Ken the Zen says, when was the last time you served someone without any compensation for yourself? Light stuff here. When was the last time you served someone without any compensation for yourself, and how did you feel upon reflection? Trick question, methinks. Because from a metaphysical perspective, I don't think you can serve someone without compensation. Now, Ken the Zen and I agree on this. He is called Ken the Zen for a reason, all right? This dude is deep into the Buddhism. I'm deep-ish into the Taoism. The two dovetail very nicely. And I think we all agree that if you get back what you put out, then the compensation comes to you. This is the concept that Ken and I talked about recently of ani, which is this traditional South American term for reciprocity. Jeff Thompson talks about this being a reciprocal universe. What you put out, you get back. And so when you serve anyone, you are compensated, even though it may not seem as though you're being compensated at the time. Now, the thing is, you need to not expect compensation. Have you ever done this? Have you ever had this happen? Have you ever had this experience where you are walking into a 401 en route or a bank or a restaurant or anywhere, and you have held the door open for someone behind you, and that person has flowed through the door without so much as an acknowledgement to you of your service, and you get annoyed by that. What you have done is served with expectation. I expect acknowledgement and gratitude for this act of service. It is very hard to do that and not get the nod. Have you ever let someone go at the four-way stop, or let somebody in who's trying to come in out of a parking lot into traffic, and you let them in, an act of service, very selfless, and you don't get the wave? Ooh, burns, man. It burns. And it is part of your curriculum, my curriculum, as Ram Dass would say, to not expect that courtesy to be repaid in the moment, to treat it as a surprising cherry on top, to be acknowledged whatsoever. That's not easy to do, man, because we are humans. We are carbon-based ego machines, as believers sang. And it's very, very difficult, to not be acknowledged for our acts of service. Now, here's the freaking key, all right? Now, Ken asked, when was the last time you served without any compensation for yourself? And I'm not going to say necessarily what that was. And the reason is, my understanding of service from a metaphysical point of view is it is best performed anonymously. Oh yeah, it is best performed anonymously. So we do not make a donation to a thing and then check the box that says make my name public, for example, right? And we do not go about looking to be acknowledged for our service, all right? We just do it anonymously and with the faith that the Ani, that this reciprocal universe will cycle that back to you. And even the Bible says, cast your bread upon the water and it will come back tenfold, right? This is difficult. This is difficult to accept, all right, in a superficial world that wants immediate reaction. And it's very easy to look around at people who you think are bad or are doing bad things and seem to be receiving compensation for that, you know? I fall into that trap a lot of times because I am such a perfect angel of a human being. Bothers me sometimes to see those I think who are not perfect angels being compensated for that. But the truth is, that's my own ego talking. And the truth is, that is a perception, merely a perception. I don't know anything about those people's lives. And the truth is, if we're going to start dishing out judgment for stuff, you better freaking duck, Jack, because judgment goes to everyone. And so acts of service are an atonement, and they always get rewarded somewhere along the way, provided they are delivered in the right spirit. And the right spirit is to deliver acts of kindness without any expectation of compensation. Not easy to do. That is next level stuff. But you, Ken the Zen, are Ken the freaking Zen. And so you, I know, have a handle on this concept. And you also have a handle on not doing a thing and then doing a lot of talking about it so as to draw attention and praise to yourself. It's very difficult to put your faith in this law of reciprocity. I mean, I've struggled with it too. I continue to struggle with it, man. But you have to believe that this works. And if it doesn't go your way, very obviously, you have to detach from that. This is one of the tenets of Buddhism, that suffering is a product of attachment. So if you attach to wanting the wave in the car, if you attach to wanting acknowledgement for making a huge donation, if you attach to wanting to be thanked and congratulated for doing some very selfless thing for someone, that causes suffering when you don't get it. Better to do the thing, to do it anonymously, to let it go. And trust that the compensation will come, but not do it for the compensation. That's the very, very difficult freaking thing. I struggle with that. I know a lot of people struggle with that. And it's not unreasonable, all right? We are human beings, for crying out loud. And if somebody doesn't wave to you after you let them in, that's kind of a dick move, man. We are living in a society here, as George Costanza said. So, again, Ken the Zen, I don't think you can provide an act of service, a genuine one that doesn't get compensated. How does it feel? Feels nice. Feels nice, especially if you believe this notion of a reciprocal universe. It feels nice to do something for someone or for a group of people and to know that you've done something that maybe just tips your karma a little bit, towards the good side or compensates for a bad karma, You can begin to wipe out karma that way. Jeff Thompson uses an illustration of a model of like a scale, right? Like the Libra scales. I'm a Libra. And your good deeds are white pebbles and your bad deeds are black pebbles. And you envision them on this scale. And what side is higher? Which side is higher or lower? You do something good and selfless and an act of service and you put a white pebble on that scale, man. And maybe it compensates for a black pebble. Maybe it erases a black pebble. I don't know. I mean, there have been a couple of things. It just feels really good to compliment people. There's one time my wife and I were flying to England, 15 years, almost 15 years ago. We were flying to England. I think this was the trip, and we were going to France. We were going to Belgium. It was my dream tour. We were going to visit First World War battle sites. And that was the big trip for me. And we flew across the ocean, of course. And the flight attendant who was working our section of the plane was just really great. She was just really great. You know, there are stereotypes about flight attendants. And, I've run across some of them that were genuinely unhappy and unpleasant people. And you smile at those people, try to make their voyage just a little bit brighter, and they scowl back at you. But this one particular lady was dynamite at it. It was, at least appeared to be, her particular dharma, to serve in this way and to do this job. And she was friendly, and she was chatty, and she was happy to bring you stuff. She looked after her people. And so as we were exiting the plane, as we walked by, I caught her eye and I said, "You're really, really good at this. Thank you." And I saw her face just kind of brighten, because I don't think a lot of flight attendants get a compliment like that. I think they get crapped on mostly, and they get kicked around by people who are irritable and complaining. And I think it's very rare for one of those people to be complimented genuinely. And I'm not looking for anything from her. I do not want a travel voucher. I do not want her to say I'm her favorite passenger that she's ever had. I just said, "You're really, really good at this. Thank you." And she lit up. And nothing beats that. All right. Nothing beats the feeling of seeing somebody else light up, of contributing to somebody else lighting up. I think about that a lot of the time as a musician. It can be difficult on stage sometimes. Prepping for shows can be a bit of a slog sometimes. It can be difficult, especially as the drummer, where you're at the back and nobody even knows you're freaking there, which is fine. You remember sometimes what you're doing is an act of service. What you're doing is entertaining people. What you're doing is giving them a reason to dance and to smile and to sing, and giving them a reason to be social together and pulling them out for a couple of hours from whatever might be the crap in their freaking lives. It is an act of service to perform music, and I have to remember that a lot of the time. And I have to remember to do that as anonymously as possible, right? So I give you the example of the stewardess, something so simple as a genuine compliment. But the thing is, the point of that is, willing to bet that as good as it felt to her, it felt better to me. Just lifts you. Now, I wrote a blog post about this. You can find it on my website. It's about if you're feeling miserable, if you're feeling lousy, if you're having a bad day, if you're depressed, if you're down, compliment somebody else. There is such a boomerang effect of complimenting somebody else. Making somebody else feel good feels good. Genuinely. Do it genuinely, all right? Don't go around like a kiss ass just saying nice things to people so you can bask in your own freaking glow. No. A genuine compliment delivered to somebody else feels really freaking good, and that is an act of service. This is the other thing. A lot of people consider, say, I got to make an act of service. I better get down to the soup kitchen today, or I better clean up the freaking park, or I better solve the human crisis. All of those are noble and admirable, but an act of service can be as simple as holding the door, or letting somebody in traffic, or paying a simple compliment. We do not have to elevate acts of service. These are simple, golden rule things. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, without expecting or attaching to or needing any sort of compensation for that. Extremely difficult to do. But if people smarter than me can be believed, incredibly powerful. And it feels freaking great. So I'm not going to tell you about my most recent act of service for which I received, quote unquote, no compensation. I have them. I'm not going to say anything about them because it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about those people, and it's about what the universe does with those acts, Ken the Zen. And I know you know exactly what I'm talking about how this freaking works, man. Shall I read to you from the Tao? Ken the Zen is a Buddhist. A lot of my friends who listen to this program are Christians. I drift these days towards the Tao. And chapter 7 of the Tao is really compelling. The master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. That is the Stephen Mitchell translation of chapter 7. Dr. Wayne Dyer, spiritualist extraordinaire, did a really powerful explication of the Tao, and he used a different translation of it. For this reason, the sage puts himself last, and so ends up ahead. He stays a witness to life, so he endures. Serve the needs of others, and all your own needs will be fulfilled. Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained. Through selfless action, fulfillment is attained. I think about that a lot. Man. What is true fulfillment and where does it come from? I'm working very hard at this. All right, this is part of the much bigger struggle of separating from the ego, because it's ego that attaches. It's ego that wants the wave. It's ego that wants to be seen making this particular donation or supporting this particular cause. And the game is to separate from that, separate from attachment. And then when you don't get the wave or don't get the acknowledgement, you don't freaking care because you've done the service. And the service is its own freaking reward. And that's hard. That is hard for humans. That is hard for this particular human. But that's my answer to the question, Ken the Zen. I don't know if it's useful or not, but you have to believe that you get back what you put out. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't be paid for things, by the way. That's a different thing. You know, money is a transaction. It is an exchange of energy. And that's a much, much different thing. And there's nothing wrong with making money in the world. It is not about that. But this attachment to results, this attachment to acknowledgement, and this service that they say is selfless, but comes with the caveat that I need a wave. You know, this is the stuff to get away from. And that is probably some of the hardest stuff that ever humans will have to do. I'm trying. I know you're trying. Hopefully the rest of you are trying as well. And I hope that answer makes some kind of sense. We're way over the golden hour, but I cannot let you get away without tipping you off to a brand new freaking song that I really dang well like. Now, on the last episode, I jokingly said the 80s revival is happening right now, and in 5 or 6 years, we can therefore expect a grunge revival. Turns out I was off by 5 or 6 years and 2 weeks. Very quickly, there's a cool band out there called Deadly Vices, and they have just released a new single called Down River. And if you want to vibe on this, when they posted it on YouTube, they did so with the following hashtags: Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Alter Bridge, a new era of grunge. If you're one of those cats, if the 80s revival does not do it for you, but a grunge revival might, I reckon you should check out Downriver. I'm not a grunge guy and you freaking know it. This does not feel like a grunge song necessarily to me. It distinctly has an Alice in Chains kind of vibe to it. And for me, it's got like a Velvet Revolver feel to it. So kind of almost like a post-grunge, really. Maybe early STP. The singer has kind of a Lane Staley vibe, has kind of a Scott Weiland vibe. I mean, if this is up your alley, you got to check this stuff out, man. This is a cool song. This is a no frills rock and roll song, all right? Verse, chorus, guitar solo, chorus, out. No freaking frills. And that was a staple of grunge faux show. Begins with some harmonics on the guitar that reminded me of the Van Halen song Girl Gone Bad. If you can listen, if you can hear that in your head, the sort of harmonics that Eddie was doing, that's from the 1984 record. Then it goes into the song. This song begins with something that sounds like that and then just goes in to this colossal grooving riff, man. And I love the chorus on this freaking song. I love the chorus on this freaking song. You know, sometimes it just gets you. And there's not a lot of vocal harmonies, anything like it. This is not 19 Summertime. This is after that, right? Great guitar tones, great guitar sounds, some chugging happening. I don't think that was a staple of the grunge movement. Some chugging, a really catchy freaking chorus. Really good tones, really good singer. And it's another band with the look, you know. They say that grunge was no frills, but there was a look. Those grunge bands had a look, particularly in the early days when they were pretty much proto-metal. Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, etc. They had the look. This band has a look too, but I really dig this song. And I can't find out much of anything about them. I really can't. I've scoured the internet. They are a new band. They do not yet have a huge following. So now is the time to get on board, you know? And Jay, you asked about new original music. This probably does not fit the category you were looking for, but that does not mean it's not a great song. This does not mean that it is not a song that freaking rocks. Straight up, Jack. This song rocks, and I love the chorus, and I think you should freaking check it out, all right? That is Deadly Vices, Down River, which gives me the chance to answer one last question from our old friend Katie Pasco, who just started laughing in the front passenger seat of the Fresh Breath van. Because Katie asked, with all the music you talk about, have you ever considered having a playlist? We've given Katie the gears about the John Huff podcast referenced on the podcast playlist on Spotify. There are 3 of those, one for each of the past 3 years of the program, upon which the 2023 version, I will put this song, Downriver by Deadly Vices, okay? And you can hear most of the music we have talked about this year is listed. It's like 70, 75 songs now. There's also a YouTube playlist, okay? I started that, I don't know, a few weeks ago. So it's got most of the videos for the songs that are available on YouTube. So you can go there. If you're not a Spotify person, you want to go to YouTube, find John Huff Podcast. That's the account. Smash that like button. Subscribe to it, all right? And you will find there just the playlist of all the referenced on the podcast 2023. The videos are all there. You can watch them. Have yourself a Friday night party. Might be the end to what you consider a perfect day. I got to tell you the truth. My throat is freaking killing me, and it's frustrating me in advance. So I'm going to go. I'm going to shutting up. I want to thank you for coming this far. And this is a long one, and I apologize for that. It's too long. Take it in 2 goes, maybe. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some insight, some interesting answers. Do go check out that song by Deadly Vices. It's very, very cool. And drop me a line. If you have questions you want me to tackle, send them my way. You can do that via the socials or my website, john-huff.com/contact. Tell me what music you're listening to. Tell me what you want me to listen to, man. This is a collaborative, cooperative thing. And please do consider patreon.com/John Huff Podcast. Hey, remember, kids, good things happen when you put yourself out there. I am going to shutting up. And hey, I'll check you later. Yeah. I really can't sing now. My voice is freaking cooked. I hate this freaking feeling, man. But I do have just enough left to go.